Hi, everyone. Give it another minute or so for people to log in. Looks like we're at max capacity, or yeah, we've got critical mass. So welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. This is the TRIG regulation implementation group focused on outreach. This is our fourth meeting already. Oh my goodness. And so the purpose, just to reiterate, for this group is to talk about how we better support the outreach for the advanced clean fleet regulation. So I'm Anne Marie Rogers, the branch chief for compliance assistance and outreach at CARB. I help chair this committee, and then we have Chris White and Cecile Buncio also. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. And I think we can kind of get started. If we've had several meetings already where we've done a few things. But today we really wanted to focus on how do we get the message out on advanced clean fleets more broadly. We have some things that we normally do. We've been attending a ton of events also, but really wanted to hand it over to Chris and Cecile to help get the conversation started with this group to figure out how do we do a better job getting more people the information and education that they need.
All right, so welcome panelists and guests, and we're so sorry that guests don't get to talk, but please make hefty use of that chat. We definitely rely on it during and after the meeting, so please share your opinions with us. I'm going to tell you just a little bit of a story here to get your brains turning. I am a consultant. I'm paid by utilities and private fleets and cities and other people to help them figure out how to move to zero emission vehicles. And every single one of my clients is like you all on this. They are in the thick of it. And they are really worried about how am I going to do it? And I don't understand how this works. And all of us have been thinking about that too. What do we need to share and say with other people so they know how to do advanced clean fleet? And then last week, I was with Yusuf and a couple of the other CARB staff at one of the events that they attended. It was at the Port of Stockton. It was a great event. I would say half the people in the room did not even know there was a regulation. And I just got off a phone call with Larry, who's with ARB, and some of our clients out in the Central Valley, and we were out on the Central Coast. And it was the same conversation that these companies do not even know there is a regulation. And why is that? Because they do not follow CARB emails or CARB websites or CARB anything else. So with this group, our panelists and our guests, you all talk to people that CARB does not talk to. And we have resources and tools that we can use that CARB doesn't have access to, or maybe we can do differently than CARB. So what we're hoping today is for you to think about resources that you have, not something that CARB creates, but how together we can say we could take this stuff from CARB and turn it around and push it back out so the people that we deal with know that this regulation is here and know about all of the tools that CARB has to get them started. So Bradley, I can see that your wheels are already turning. So I'm wondering if there's something you might share that you could do to help spread the news.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think I'm a consultant as well, and I experience a lot of what you're experiencing. I think right now, if we were to say, here's the regulation and here's all the tools, it's a lot to digest for any client who's coming in or fleet who's coming in to try to understand the regulation. there's some events, some big events coming up, and I know CARB's involved in the ACT in Las Vegas, and the NAFA conference is in a couple weeks in San Antonio. If I had some talking points, from CARB that I could just, when I'm walking around the floor, and just share those talking points, and they were all kind of aligned. All of us were aligned with these talking points, so we're all talking about the same things, and how to get things rolling, slowly without alerting anyone to this. Because I think a lot of clients think this is a gigantic thing that I absolutely cannot comply with, and it's just not true. There's so many ways to comply with the regulation, and the waiver things out there. I think that there's a lot of miscommunication about the waiver and how the EPA is treating CARB on the waiver, and that nothing's going to happen and it's going to die. Those kind of things are out there too. So really, for me, I guess long way around to say, why don't we get together and have some aligned talking points that'll get people into the system, and then we just roadmap them into the system so we can just walk them into this crawl, walk, run kind of into the regulation, if that makes sense.
I love that. Back when I was doing marketing full time, we talked about portable messages, things that are short and to the point and don't open the door for 12 other questions, and just get those across, these portable messages that we can't mess up. Cecile, I see your hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to remind everybody, I know everybody's excited what our agenda is for today. It's not only about getting the ACF message out. What are your suggestions for the campaign? Because CARB is about to release their RFP to hire a consultant to help with the messaging for ACF. So if you can provide that suggestion and recommendation to CARB, that will be greatly helpful to them, as well as, the ACF toolkit. They're finalized it based on suggestions from everybody. So CARB staff will show it later in the meeting. So just as a friendly reminder for all the members here, so that it's easier for us to see who's asking questions, can you raise your hand? That way we can see like who's 1, 2, 3. So that way it's more like a reminder for everybody. But thank you for all your comments, and we look forward to hearing it. Thank you.
And Cecile, just to clarify, the RFP is out on the streets. We hope to make an award next month. But we do need messaging.
Oh, there you go.
James?
As I'll jump in if nobody else is willing. So my perspective on this is probably a little bit different. We're a truck and body equipment dealership, and dealing with end user customers affected by ACF every day. I think from our vantage point, the best vehicle is going to be through companies like ours, because we're talking to the customers buying equipment and vehicles from us. I think where it becomes very challenging is the messaging about ACF is still a bit gray from CARB. And so from our vantage point, we feed our families selling trucks and equipment. We're all kind of struggling to do that right now. And one of the most common questions we get from our customers is, well, what happens if we don't comply? We can't make it. We can't comply. And we don't have any answers to give. And so I think you have a huge opportunity if you can tap into the dealer network and at least create, very clear understandings and boundaries. I'll be happy to carry the message. I know most of my colleagues would too, but we just don't really know what we can or can't say. And the last thing that we want to tell our customers is, don't buy this vehicle that you want to buy or this truck that you want to buy, because you can't if we don't have anything else to do to feed our family. But if we understood kind of the whole playing field and we could educate them, if you do this, this is what happens, and vice versa, we'd be happy to pass, that message along. So I think leaning into networks and dealers would be really, really powerful. I'll give you an example. We had a group of 5 fleet managers local in Sacramento meet, pretty big cities and agencies, all discussing whether or not they were able to comply. And the feedback was, no, we can't. And everybody kind of said, well, what now? And I'd like to jump in and educate and be helpful and try and aid the transition, but we just don't really know what we can or can't say and what that looks like. So I think trying to clean up that messaging would be hugely helpful. And I think you get a lot of truck dealers behind you, but right now it's almost like taboo to even talk about.
And I want to ask you a little bit of a probing question before we go on, and then we'll go to Jesus and then Kristen, and Bruce gets to go last. Bruce always gets the final word, or the close to final, third place word. In the early years of bringing out battery electric cars in dealerships, there was all of this momentum about educating dealers and let's do specs and let's do these other things. And I'm not sure where it worked and where it didn't. So when you think about your dealership, what are you talking about? Are you talking about point of purchase display? Is it a handout? Is it a what that says buy this, not that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a scaffolded approach. I think it's everything included. I think the outside sales team talking to customers need to be educated. They need to know what they can and can't say. They need to understand the entire piece of regulation, not just a little piece. They need to understand how it all interacts with ACT going on. Anybody that sells heavy trucks is really, really hurting. And so everybody is very frustrated and challenged. And so you have a group of champions, if you could figure out how to corral them, who are talking to these end user customers more than anyone. But right now, everybody is, hate to say it, but it's a very adversarial type relationship. I mean, I hope you guys know that's not me. That's why I'm here. But there are a lot of folks in the truck community and equipment community saying, I'm not going to help CARB. We don't want to talk about it because effectively I'm going to lose my job or I can't feed my family because of the regulation. So if there's a way to kind of soften that, I think you'd have huge advantage there. I think people would help. As a dealer, I know we just want to communicate clearly and let our customers make educated decisions. But again, the most common question we get is what happens if we don't? What happens if we can't? What about the waiver process? And there's just a lot of stuff that hasn't made its way out to the public yet. I think if that gets cleared up, you've got a great resource there.
Great, thank you. Jesus, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I would echo James's comments. I think maybe as an outreach group, we could be more direct in our messaging and communications with professional networks, associations, and dealerships. What I would think, maybe keeping kind of like a address book of all those different associations and dealers groups that everybody can contribute, and reaching out and making sure they're okay with getting those communications, but sending communications via email with saying, this month we want to communicate this to the groups, can you help us spread the word to the members of your organization, or your customers, and then also kind of getting some feedback. Maybe they could also poll their customers or their members to see how many are familiar with ACF, what do they want to know more about ACF, so we can tailor some of the resources to them. So kind of just establishing those direct communications with different organizations and using that as well to gather feedback. Yeah, that's what I would suggest, and I'm open to hear what other folks think about maybe doing something like that.
Jesus, remind me of who you're here representing. Who do you represent in this group?
SCB Water, we're a government water agency.
Okay, so I'm wondering if there are, even when you talk about industry groups, do you think it would come more weight if you were to go to the Water Agency Managers of America? Would it carry more weight coming from you or from CARB?
From those organizations, yeah, your NAFAs, your Aquas.
Yeah, but who takes the message to them? Is it you or is it CARB? Who has the relationship and carry the weight?
I think a little bit of both, right?
Okay.
I think the messaging should come from CARB, but I think maybe just those maybe connections could come from the members in this group, and just making sure that we can add and say to CARB, these are the some of the industry groups that we need to be reaching out to and communicating with.
That's awesome, super helpful. Kristen.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
I'm Kristen Aldred. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Kristen Aldridge from Stericycle. Thank you for having me today. I'm filling in for Susan Olivario. Going back, Chris, to what you said earlier about going to events and only about half of the people have even heard of this. And when you're working on messaging, it seems like you might have some different audiences that are in different places. So some people, companies, organizations, like those people who are on the call, have some familiarity, are already starting to think about questions, down the line of things in the way that they're developing, like infrastructure or how the exemption process works. But other folks just need that first message that this exists and where to start. So just trying to think about it in terms of when you do develop the messages, being targeted to different kinds of groups, kind of meeting them where they're at, because I think you're probably going to have a pretty broad spectrum of knowledge.
Kristen, in some of our other projects, we have, and these are aimed at light duty things. We've put people into, and buses, by the way, we've put people into 4 personas: the EV enthusiast, the EV ready, the EV curious, and the EV skeptical. So I'm wondering if any of that, with the folks that you talk to, is there another group in there? Does that resonate as personas for whom we have to design messaging? What do you think?
Yeah, not thinking about it so much in terms of where, whether or not they're skeptical or how bought in they are, but do they even know that this applies to them? So, for example, a major hospital system that might have a number of vehicles, and I don't know if that fits in this category here or not, but groups that might, or professionals who manage a fleet who might not even be aware that this is something that's going to impact them soon. So I guess that's just a little bit different way to look at it than how they feel about EVs.
Yeah, that's good. I'm writing myself a note here, and I wrote down, if I were to take my 4 personas, I would say ACF, I'm all in. ACF, I know about it. ACF, really? Do I have to do it? And ACF, not me. So does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Bruce, and then James again. James, I don't know if it's James or Jim, but you say James on screen, so that's it.
Yeah, I do go by James. Yep.
Okay.
You know what?
Bruce
Why don't we let James go first, and I'll tell you why. Because whether or not I have the last word, I have a lot of them, and you guys have brought up a lot of questions and comments that I'd really like to dive into a little bit, because I think there's a really good discussion going on, and we at CARB need to understand some of this a little bit more, and I think you guys need to understand how we've tried to do things and might get some help. So why don't we let James take this one, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, yeah, as I say this, it is only really in the interest of, having a positive outcome here. But I really do think, Chris, what you suggested, there's a group of people that say, no way, no how, I don't want to do this. I don't have a way to do this. And in my experience, just like with my youngest son, when he wants to not take a bath at night, or right, he's going to take a bath come hell or high water. And I think that without people understanding what this really means, people won't make decisions. And, it's not that we want to be applying great penalties, but there are people that do have to make business decisions based upon their situation. And if there are penalties, they need to be aware. And I think that when you have that group of people, and I'm kind of that way myself, I'm a skeptic by nature, but if I don't understand the entire landscape or the whole playing field, I'm just not going to do anything until I do. And right now, we had an event a couple of weeks ago at our facility here in Sacramento. David Renstra came and spoke to a group of fleet managers, and a lot of questions about the waiver process, and nobody understood it. A lot of questions about exemptions versus waivers, and the whole kind of playing field, and a lot of questions about what happens if we don't comply. And without having clear answers, it's just like, well, you have to do it. We don't really necessarily know. And on top of that, and again, I'm going to beat a dead horse here, but a lot of customers that want to make these decisions because of ACT. I've got customers that say, okay, I'm going to buy a Ford Lightning long range because I can, and I'm going to buy an electric or a diesel dump truck, excuse me, right? Well, if they don't know they can't get the truck for that dump truck because of ACT limitations in the marketplace, they're making bad decisions for their fleet just because of a lack of information. And so I think that a lot of people are kind of paralyzed and frozen. A lot of the folks that do understand it, they just don't understand enough. So they're doing nothing. And so I do think we have to educate, and, you know, good, bad, or ugly, everybody deserves to know every little piece of this thing. And I think that will help people adopt faster.
You know, I've been doing this for a long time, almost 20 years now, but my job before this, I worked for IBM and I did new technology introduction. So I only worked with things that, and some of those things you guys never ever saw come across your office or your desk, but other things were things like crazy stuff like wireless networking and World Wide Web and selling things online. But one of the things in the IT industry they talk about is FUD, the FUD factor, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And when any of those exist, no one moves forward. And in the IT world, that was really prevalent because the FUD was created by don't buy that one because the better one is coming next week. So it sounds like we really need to think about how we tackle the FUD factor in our messaging too. All right, we got a lot of people on the panel, and I don't see any more hands. And I know some of y'all have opinions on.
I'm jumping in now, Chris. I'm going to take my opportunity back.
Okay, Katie, Christopher, James Gonzalez, you guys get your, and Ricardo, you guys get your comments ready because you have been vocal in the past.
Yep, and like I said, I have a lot of questions because there's some really good stuff that's been brought up here, and comments as well. First of all, I really do think that the idea of, and I forget who said it earlier, of like some speaking points is really a great thing. I think we could develop something. What I'd really like to find out, and I don't know if we have time here, is like what some of the topics are. James, I absolutely appreciate what you're saying, and it's very, very admirable that you as dealers, and I really get that, and we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. You want to know everything you possibly can to help your customer. And again, I appreciate that. Knowing every detail, you're probably not going to know every detail, but we want to equip everyone we can with all the information we can. I did a webinar, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago now, that SoCal Edison put on, and they put it on specifically for dealers in their region. And it seemed to be really well received. I'm doing another one for them for state and local governments soon. Things like that are great. James, I'm gonna throw one back at you a little bit. You mentioned that there was an event recently here in Sacramento, and part of that was discussing ACF. I would have loved to have come over and given a presentation, or one of our staff come over. And I know it's so easy. I do the same thing. It's so easy to forget this or that. Having said that, and I think we brought it up last time in this meeting, we certainly have some budget constraints as to where we can travel. We are traveling a fair amount still. But Sacramento would have absolutely been a wonderful venue for us to come out to. And I realize there may have been other reasons that wouldn't have been a good thing. I understand it might not have, but I've done so many outreach events like that. Someone else said, and I absolutely appreciate this thought. It's the thought of you've got the people that know quite a bit about the rule. You've got the people that know nothing, that don't even know they're subject to it. I'll say again that one of the ways that I try and approach, and I think we try and approach in general, outreach, when I'm invited out or any of our staff to give a presentation, we want to start with that really basic stuff. And we do, of here's who's subject. Yeah, you might actually be subject to it. Then we're going to dive a little deeper in depending on the audience. So we're always willing to, to kind of tailor that message a little. But I think we can give a presentation that starts with that, complete, oh my gosh, there's this thing out there that I have to comply with, on up to the more than basics. I won't say just basics. So let's see, I've got so many notes here. So those are some of the thoughts that I had. Like I said, one of the big things that I would really like to know is these messages. Again, I think that's a great idea to supplement the outreach we're doing. You mentioned, this idea of providing as much information as we can. I've heard exemptions and extensions come up a few times. Are you guys aware that we discuss exemptions and extensions fairly extensively in the targeted work groups that we've given or workshops we've given, where we've talked about state and local government or high priority fleets? And if not, that's a big problem for us. Why aren't we getting people more aware of it? I mean, there's a lot of tools out there. There are a lot more that need to be developed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we think we're done with that. We're not. But there are tools, and I keep hearing, oh, you guys need to give us this information. And I usually say, well, it's there, but how do I package it for you? How do I get that information to you? I'd really like to hear more input on that as well. My goodness, I've probably got other things to oh, I know one last thing. Someone mentioned the associations, the like the water district associations. I believe it was Aqua. I went down, I'm pretty sure it was Aqua, about a year ago, went and gave a presentation at their annual whatever. I want to say it was in Palm Springs or Palm Desert. I've gone and I've talked to those folks, but it doesn't seem to spread from that point outward. So how do I get that? And obviously a lot of it is just, using folks like that are in this group, using other resources we might have or that you can present to us so that we can continue to spread that. But again, we have done many of these things, at least to some extent. How do we multiply that? How do we multiply the impact of doing that? And with that, I'll stop for now.
So Bruce, I just wanted to add on the exemptions or the extensions, because a lot of people, I think some of the consultants are telling entities that it's easy to get an exemption or extension. I think it would be helpful if CARB produces a flow chart, how to get an extension, how to get an exemption, depending on whether your vehicle is available, if there's an equivalent ZEV for that. That will be helpful for everybody, because that's what we're hearing. The consultants were just telling us like, oh, don't worry, you can get an exemption. We're like, what? So not a lot of people know what's your timeline in getting it approved. Do you need to get an exemption or an extension? For example, if you're using the ZEV milestone option, whether you need to plan out a year ahead for you to do that, because planning is critical in order for you to meet your targets. And that's what a lot of the consultants out there, no offense, that's what they're telling clients. Get an exemption. We're like, okay, how fast can you get the exemption? So that's a thing I think CARB needs to clarify.
See, that means two things to me, and I think so when I heard that at first, when you first said people are saying it's easy to get an extension, what I hear in my head is, I just apply and they'll give you an extension for anything. They don't care. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think the path that you went down more, which was, hey, it doesn't happen right away. How long does it take? So it's both of those things I think that need to be addressed. And again, when I give a presentation, I try and stress, look, you don't come in and say, oh, we don't have anything. You got to demonstrate it. But this is that I think is something good on this kind of these talking points. Thank you, Cecile.
Thank you, Bruce. I think it's James, Bradley, and then Christopher.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
I'm talking on mute, you guys. You didn't give me the scowly face for not understanding the mute button. Go ahead, James.
Sorry. Yeah, no, Cecile, to your point, I think that's really interesting because I actually was in a meeting with Steve and Jack a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about what's available in ZEV and not, and the category in garbage trucks and sweepers and stuff like that came up, right? And their impression was, because of what they've seen from a marketing perspective, was, oh yeah, that stuff's out there. You can go get that. And in reality, it's not, or it is not capable of doing the necessary work. And so we have a lot of customers using this type of equipment. They're saying, well, wait a minute, The regulation says if something's available, I have to buy it. It's not going to work. We've already tried it and tested it. CARB is saying, well, it looks like it's available, so you have to buy it. So there's this whole gray area as to, well, am I going to get a waiver? Am I going to get an exemption? And, you know, as of a couple of weeks ago in the presentation that Dave gave, his feedback was only one application for waiver had been submitted at that point and had not been approved or denied. And so there's a huge amount of, I think, anxiety. You know, am I going to get this? Am I not? If I get it, how am I going to get a truck? Right. And I think that when people aren't sure, they just do nothing. And so I think, Cecile, your point about the flow chart, understanding timelines, you know, what will get an exemption or waiver, what won't, classic and constructive examples would be hugely helpful.
So I want to give one quick example, and that I think it's a great idea, especially on the timelines. When it comes to what will and what won't, and what you just said, James, strikes a chord with me because, again, a presentation I gave just a couple months ago was in front of a group that was mostly fleet managers, mostly government fleet managers, and they brought up something I didn't realize, and I think you just were out. What you were just talking about was it. They talked about dump trucks. And yes, we know there are some out there. Now, one of the points that was brought up, however, is that at least some of the configurations, and I'm not going to say all of them because I know I've talked to different manufacturers, and I think some people maybe cherry pick it a little bit. You know, well, we talked to this one guy, but one of the things that and I'm not saying it's not the case in some cases, it may be every manufacturer. Someone brought up the point that, look, in order to fit the battery in, they had to make it whatever it was, 10 feet longer, something like that. Well, that all of a sudden interfered with our ability to do a certain type of work that we do. Maybe it's coming out of pits or whatever the case was. Okay, now I can't tell you right now that you're going to apply for that as a waiver and you're going to get it. Okay, I mean, I would say that makes absolute sense. You're going to have to explain it. And again, this is me saying this right now without, looking at anything. But if that's correct, I think that would result in a valid waiver. But that one is a little hard to say, is you're going to get this and not that. So it's the message, absolutely, like a timeline, I think is fantastic, which should build in a time for them to apply for that waiver and find out.
Yeah, I just want to agree with James. There's a point where the waiver becomes the default, and because of the things Bruce you're saying as well. So we tend to grab onto the fact that vehicle's not going to work exactly for what I want it to do. For instance, the HVIP list has 1-ton trucks. We're going to call them trucks on the HVIP list that are basically a cutaway van with a service body on it. You can't like for like replace a 1-ton 4-wheel drive pickup truck crew cab with a cutaway van. And so if we're saying those are the vehicles that are available, the waiver is going to be the default for a consultant or another fleet looking at it and to see, I appreciate what you're saying. That seems to be the direction that we immediately go to. Well, I'm going to comply by filing an exemption or a waiver. Well, I don't think that should be the message, from CARB. I think the message from CARB is here's how we're going to assist you in complying with the regulation. And here is the flow chart to get there. Just like James was saying, we need to have a very distinct, defined way to get to compliance. If that's includes the waiver, then it includes the waiver. But it needs to include all of the ways to compliance, not just the waiver, not just an exemption. We need to have this flow chart out there and those talking points like I'm talking about before. When we introduce ourselves as part of the outreach group, what are we doing, in unison that's going to get people to compliance? Because I think that's why we're all here, because we're wanting to assist CARB in getting to the compliance. And that means a lot of different things. So we just need to figure out as a group, what does that mean? What are our uniform talking points to get there? What's the flow chart? How do we get there without, and Joseph, I appreciate you throwing out the exemption fact sheets and all of the things that we have in this library of information, but it's so much to digest. There's so much information out there. You have to know where this fact sheet is, that fact sheet, this frequently asked question, that frequently asked question. We need to have just a way for these fleets to know, here's how I get there in the path of least resistance. And that's what they want. That's what all my clients want. You know, they just want the path of least resistance to get there. And, you know, sometimes that path of least resistance is not what CARB wants it to be. And, you know, we just need to be able to agree to get this implemented in the right way. It's a lot.
So this is Chris Mondano from Next Era Mobility. I represent a company that focuses on consulting and also infrastructure for EV charging. So I think I echo the points made so far today. I think there's two levels of communication that likely need to happen. I think it's one on the outreach to folks that are aware of ACF and are now identifying what they need to do about it. There's also the folks that just haven't heard about ACF to begin with. And on my side, at least, I want to add another point to the folks or the group that is aware of ACF and is trying to better understand how to address it. Where I've heard specific feedback is I am using some tool that CARB put together, but I also have a consultant who is trying to guide me through this process. And now I also have an internal team that is looking at where I purchase vehicles from and if it makes sense from my perspective. So there tends to be, if they're good about it, one central figure within these organizations that is addressing their compliance policy or their purchasing policy, or is the one person that sort of connects different departments together. And I think finding those advocates within organizations can be especially hard, especially given that organizations have different ways of operating within each other. So making the messaging as sort of uniquely comprehensive across the different types of personas is especially useful, but also recognizing what questions they might have. So I'm happy to provide feedback on the different types of people that I've heard provide comments on ACFs. For example, one is a national fleet. It's a retail entity. And they specifically said, we didn't know about ACF until 2 months ago, and now we're freaking out. Now we have no idea what to do. Now we have no idea where to purchase things from. What's my timeline to get there? And this person had a champion that was able to talk to their internal purchasing department, that was able to talk to their fleet managers to figure out where they're able to do that. But not all organizations have it. So I think addressing it from a point of view of, is this person who is leading the effort aware of all the things they sort of need to know from CARB and how that impacts their organization's operations? If not, what do they need to do in order to find out more? And I think to the point of, there's so much information on the CARB page, where do I go? Potentially having, and looking through it, there's obviously the FAQ section, having sort of easy to access links that also tie to the other documents would be especially helpful in this scenario.
So I'm going to jump in real quick on an aside and explain why I wasn't paying attention. Turns out the Q&A for our attendees was disabled for this meeting, and the attendee comments are so important. So I really quickly made a Google Doc that I pasted in the chat. So hopefully folks can access the Google form, the 110 attendees, and give us your feedback as well. And as I put in my chat, I did it really quick, so please ignore spelling and grammar errors and double words and other things like that. So, but please do fill it out so we can hear your thoughts as well. And Cecile, since you were paying attention, I'll let you keep calling on names.
Okay, I think it's Kristen and then Katie Cox afterwards.
Thanks. Just two quick things. One is the timeline flowchart that you're talking about. It might be helpful to have something where you work back from a date, and maybe even have something on a website where as you're making these choices, this is the path I've chosen, has an end date or a goal, and then it spits out a series of steps and when you need to do those in order to reach that deadline. I think if there was something a little more personal like that people could then download or or export and have the link to all these different great tools that you have, but in one place with their personal sort of to-do list with dates. The second thing is, I don't know about maybe targeting people on LinkedIn. So I've heard people talk about, you know, how do you find that right person in the organization? I think you can target geographically and by title. So you could be pushing information out to fleet managers or whatever it might be in California, and then, you know, getting out all of this good information that you've recorded or you have on the website. And then I think it's, you know, people need to hear things many, many times over before that they notice it. Thanks.
Thank you. Just wanted to highlight the Advanced Clean Fleets Calculator. I wasn't familiar with it, but I was listening to the conversation, feeling like developing something like that would be a good idea. I did drop it in the chat that I have access to, but maybe something that expands on that. I've always found those really useful, even something with a survey that folks can take to kind of assess how the regulation applies to them in a way that feels painless. Might support fleets. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I think next is James Wheeler.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to circle back, guys, because I know the focus is what can we do as a committee, not what can CARB do, right? And I really, really believe you have to get to the people who are touching the customers at the end. And, you know, again, that's what I do. That's what truck dealers do. And, you know, unfortunately, the climate that we're in, it is adversarial. There's got to be a way to create a different vibe there, because I talk to 20 different customers today, and I talk about this stuff every day. I think there's a lot of truck and body companies like mine that don't do that. And I think you have an opportunity there. So as a body company, to give you an example, I meet with a lot of the truck dealership groups, whether it be Velocity, California Truck Centers, Rush Truck, et cetera. And we have done presentations for their sales teams to talk about what equipment we sell to put on their trucks. So I know it seems like a mountain, but if you really break down the diesel truck and ZEB truck dealerships in the state, there's not a ton of them. And the ownership is shared amongst a lot of the local dealerships. And so I think you could probably get to the dealer principals of a lot of these truck groups and push the message to them and try to get access to their teams. I think that would be a really good way to do it. It's probably going to take some wine and roses to get the opportunity, but I think that's a good strategy because, again, I mean, salespeople are talking to customers every single day, more than anybody, and I think they can carry that message.
I think it's Bruce and then Christopher.
Thank you. And, you know, along the lines of some of the things that that James has been saying, you know, one, I mentioned that I had done a webinar that SoCal Edison had put on for dealerships, and I'd love to do some more things like that. You know, I've actually been asked for a couple of years now by one or two dealerships whenever I happen to talk to them for something like that, and really until 6 months or so ago, I didn't quite get what the difference would be, you know, between what we do to educate a fleet and what we do to educate a dealership. Now, in fact, there's not a lot, but there are some distinct differences, and that was on me for not getting, you know, kind of those distinct differences. So, you know, how do I tap into those folks? James, people like you, some of the other dealers that are very, very interested in selling these vehicles, they're a good start to try and help me get the word out. You know, you've mentioned that it's adversarial, and you know, I'm going to speak as the longtime regulator and former local district inspector. It's always to some degree going to be that way. I mean, we have a regulation, we're enforcing that regulation. It was the same on diesel vehicles, the same, but I know it's a much bigger thing now. I understand that, but to overcome that, One is, yes, absolutely educate people on what they need to do for the regulation. And we are trying, we're trying to do that all the time. We're trying to make better tools, and this group is a part of that. The other thing is to educate them on what these vehicles are all about, what they need to know to operate these vehicles. And I think that's probably the biggest area of fear and unknown is I don't even know how to operate this thing and how it's going to work in my fleet. So that's something else we're trying to do. And so I hope those things are helpful. Again, it's just we need to do a better job of getting of leveraging what we're doing now to get that word out even further. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Yeah, to go back to the point, I guess that James was making earlier about the communication with the dealers. So I know several of them, at least from the OEMs that I've talked to, do have internal consulting teams that are often used for their, larger clients. But obviously, the communication is important for, the smaller fleets. And I do want to say, however, that for the larger fleets, where I have seen the biggest impact is in developing that timeline of sequence of events of what happens now, what's the potential timeline in your market to get an EV rolled out, delivered, and all the charging associated with that. So what we do and how I outreach to my customers and provide that timeline is by giving them alternatives, right? It's either you do this today and it's going to take you an X amount of time, or you wait and see and it might take you even longer. So that's at least what's gained traction from my point of view in the outreach that I've done is if you wait and see, all of a sudden you're going to be in a mad rush and a scramble to compete with everyone else. Um, so think about it more early on and think about what strategies you need to put in place earlier on in order for you to make a decision. It's better to have a decision and a plan of action and to look to execute on it than to sort of just hold off and wait to see how the cookies crumble and then get in the game. At least that's what I've found to be effective with some fleets that are a bit more hesitant to act based on ACF.
Thank you, Chris. I just wanted to add, I don't think it's all adversarial to comply with. It's just that it costs a lot of money to comply with ACF. So that's another thing. Just to let you know, our financial people are not even on board with this. Like we're asking for resources to comply with ACF because we need additional resources to do the reporting, everything. And we actually got denied and they don't believe it. They're like, nope. So this is the reality we face. I work for a government entity, but that's how they see. So that's why, you know, they know it's coming, but until I guess they're waiting for penalties, they're not going to give us resources. So that's another thing that we face. This is just a suggestion because we already have several deadlines to submit our inventory, probably except for the high priority fleets because and the feds because it's optional for them. But the drayage their group already submitted their inventory, I think in January, and then local and state, we are due to submit our inventories by April 1st. So I would think CARB would have those sets of groups ready as like a contact person for updates, right? For when they submit their inventory through truckers, you have the contact info of the different entities required to submit. Probably just missing is the federal and the high priority because their deadline last month was it's optional. So I wonder whether CARB can tap into those set of entities for you guys to do your outreach as well. I mean, they are aware of already of the regulation, but you have your two sets of data by April 1st for those two groups.
Cecile, you raise an interesting point and something we did not ask the CARB staff for in advance. So if the answer is we don't know, that's fair. Do you have an idea of how many fleets have reported through truckers yet? Since the priority fleet deadline is passed and the municipal state fleet is this week. Is it hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands?
I don't know.
I don't know either. We could probably find out
Yeah, we could.
pretty
Yeah.
quickly. But we're just not tracking that on our end. Yeah, that's
That
good.
would be
So,
kind of an interesting data point because we can tell from CHP, from the bit inspections, how many terminals there are and what CHP thinks are as trucks that live in California. It would be really interesting because that would give us at least, it wouldn't be perfect, but it would say we reached 25% of the what we think is the fleet in California, 90%.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Other comments on this topic before we move on? We're going to move on to talking about the next thing which is that advertising campaign. Oh, we had one more thing too about speaking requests and TRIG support. During our planning meeting, one of the things that came up is that CARB gets more requests to speak than they have humans and hours to speak. And we talked a little bit about this, we don't have to decide today, but I'd like you to think about the opportunity to be a speaker bureau so that CARB could say, hey, Cecile, you're in this neck of the woods, or these are your people. Could you cover this? And for those of us, Brad, and Christopher, that are consultants, it would be a little tricky for us to not also sell ourselves. So we'd have to have some rules, some guidelines around that. I'm not shy with the mic, man. Give me a chance to speak. I'll speak. But if that is something that you're interested in doing, maybe send an email. TRIG members, panel members, send an email over to Anne Marie or Bruce and let them know that you would be willing to pinch it.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Just to comment on your point, Chris, as well. I think that what our roles as consultants is to make sure that they're aware, right? That's our big role, is to give them something to react to and then help guide through the process. And so separately, of course, we're actively advocating for all the resources that CARB has available for people to learn more. And obviously that, we don't gain anything from them just visiting CARB's website. So we'll continue to do that. And I think it's also important to highlight, any materials that CARB has, we're happy to help distribute and advocate on CARB's behalf.
Great. Yeah, that would be really helpful because Bruce and his team, and we do have resources, but everybody's new. So trying to get them up to speed too on understanding the reg, in depth, is just going to take a little bit. So lots of you know way more than some of the new staff that we've hired. So that would be awesome to be able to leverage your expertise. And I think this, set of talking points will really help too, for folks to be able to share. Okay, so yeah, so as Cecile mentioned earlier, we do have a media campaign. We're expecting proposals next week, I think, and then hope to make an award by mid-April. But what's going to be really critical is this messaging that we need to start working on. It will be for multiple regulations, ACF with the highest priority, but it'll also be clean truck check and off-road regulation as well. So I think the messaging that we can come up with as a group here will then just be relayed over to our contractor. So it's going to be super important for us to make sure that that messaging is direct, that it's easy to understand, it's portable, I think, Chris, is the term you use. So yeah, any suggestions? Maybe we can talk about it next month. We're hoping to make an award by next month, but state process, the contract probably won't be started until probably early June. So we have some time.
Anne Marie,
Yeah.
sorry. Does that RFP include messaging that's videos or audio, or is it just limited to print and website?
It's everything.
Very
It's
good.
B-roll, it'll be videos, it'll be radio. for our clean truck check, which we have ongoing right now, they do these digital ads on the back of trucks. So we have our message on several trucks that are driving. So that's a new strategy for us. So that's been pretty effective. So it'll be things like that too.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, so there's that. And then the next item was suggestions for the ACF campaign. And so what this was is, I don't know if it was Jesus that asked last time about this kind of Shark Week concept. And so we've really, taken a hard look at that. And we think maybe not a week, but we're thinking the whole month of April will be a different message each week about ACF. About the different components. There'll be one on how to report. There'll be one on funding that's available to, and how our funding programs interact with ACF. And then we have a few others. So we thought 1 week was maybe too much information overload, but maybe one a week. A week instead of just, a solid week of doing it. We'll do one every week. And we hope to have you share that out as we send them out. We would like for you to then send those out to your constituents, your networks, your associations, your clients. So hopefully that gets it kind of, that Shark Week kind of just providing ACF information on a very continuous basis. We will not be having a Q&A session, which we've been having them kind of pretty regularly for the last several months, but we're not going to have one in April. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to still get information out. James?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful on the outreach side if you could get some testimonials from fleet owners who are actively trying to comply. Everybody wants to know what their neighbor's doing, and it's a lot easier to make some of these difficult decisions if your colleagues are doing it as well. So if there was a way to get folks potentially from the utilities side of the world, from the on-road side of the world, private, public, and maybe have them speak on behalf of the ACF and not in, support or something else, but just have them explain what they're doing, how they're doing it, right? And I think that will help a lot of people and maybe open a pipeline and a lifeline too for someone to say, hey, I'll just give Dave a call. Then I saw he's doing this, and it may encourage some more of those conversations. So that might be helpful.
So I'm going to steal an idea from Anne Marie, and because she was the one who really mentioned it, but I'm going to swipe it a little bit. And you can do this once a month in April and call it Taco Tuesday. And I was playing with the word taco, and I came out with trucks and compliance options. Somebody can come up with a better acronym than that. That was what I could do fast. My first one was really bad. But Jesus, I love the idea of Shark Week, and we thought about Carb Week and Truck Week, and Cecile, I don't remember what we came up with. We came up with something clever around that idea as well.
I can't remember right now. Let me think. I thought I wrote my
God.
notes. I thought
Oh, yes, it was so clever, and now we'll think about it.
So Chris, would it be better to just take a week in April and just push out a lot of ACF information, or would you rather that we do it once a week for the whole month of April?
So first, let's ask a question for everybody. When Anne Marie says push out, what do you think that means? Is that email messages? Is that Facebook? Is that LinkedIn? Where are you, and what would you share?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking this whole group, because I'm going to tell you, for me, it would be LinkedIn. I don't do Facebook, but I run both my LinkedIn and our company LinkedIn website. And so LinkedIn messages are stuff I could share really quick. Email is trickier for me to push it back out again.
Okay.
What does everybody else think? It shouldn't be run on what I do.
I would interpret as all of the above that you listed.
Okay. So Jesus, what would you share it on? if Anne Marie sent you a truck week or Taco Tuesday or whatever it's gonna be called, what would you share it on? All of them? None of them?
Yeah, LinkedIn, email, and then I'll think of something else.
Okay.
I'd say if there's a way to, create some we can repost, it's difficult for us to send stuff directly to customers on email. But I'm happy to repost information and an informative post. It's again, we've got to kind of toe that line a little bit, but happy to get the word out.
So James, is that LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram are probably the three that we use, although I'm the least tech savvy of my entire company. So I'll find some help to make it happen, but those are the three that we use.
And I don't want anybody to feel like saying something out loud commits you to doing it. We're gonna come and monitor you. We're not. It's just getting a gauge of where ARB should spend their time. I kind of like the idea of once a month, as long as it's or once a week for a month. I like that. It gives us an opportunity to gauge feedback and then give some input to the marketing company when they come on board. Because as clever as I think that we are, I'm sure they are way more clever than we.
Anne Marie, you mentioned how to report and funding. Do you know what the other 2 weeks are? The themes?
I think it was gonna be, we talked about doing maybe the fleet calculator, highlighting that, just, knowing that it's there. I think one was about resources in general. All of the fact sheets that we have, the searchable FAQ, all of the training videos and that have already been posted. And then I think there are 5 weeks in April. So I think the last one was gonna be a focus on events, because we don't have a ton in April, but we will be gearing up in May to do many more events. Like hopefully we're going to go to ACT Expo, we're scheduled, but we'll see for sure in the next few weeks. But then we have some other events that we're planning to do in May.
Anne Marie, this may again be a question for the marketing company, or go back and ask. Thinking kind of what James is saying, and certainly what I hear about my clients. Oh, you can't, I can't get, nobody makes anything that looks like that. I'm just wondering if we can do something like, that says, thinking you can't buy a truck that does that? Here are 6. Yeah. Can we not just regulation, but what you can buy? And I'm seeing some really cool things coming out with charging stations now too. ABB just showed off a truss built system. So the charging, it looks like a truss across your loading dock, and the charging station, there's one on the ground, but everything else is attached to the truss. It actually comes down from the truss, and it answers a lot of problems for a lot of my clients. So, if there are ways that we can be problem solvers. Oh, yes, you can buy one of these. May not look like what you're driving today, but who doesn't want something different? Remember when we all thought the Prius was a weird looking vehicle? And now look. So.
Chris, for the record, I still think Priuses look funny.
Well, I'm going to vote for funniest looking vehicle is the Tesla Cybertruck. That gets my #1 point for weirdest looking vehicle. Any other thoughts about that? I would definitely push stuff out on LinkedIn, Anne-Marie.
Okay.
Just Chris, to go along with that, what's available? We're talking about EVs, but also maybe some hydrogen examples, if that could be worked in somewhere.
Definitely, we fuel neutral, Kristen.
Or, yeah, maybe even there's a little bit of getting back to basics. What is an EV truck? What is a fuel cell truck? What are the difference? What does a ZEV mean? I think there are an awful lot of folks that are You know, we're way ahead of them, and if they don't even know what it is. You know, it's joke that my clients always start with 22 reasons an EV will never work for me. And then by the time we get to the end of their project, they're all excited about getting them. But we always start with 22 reasons it will never work here. Because they
Yeah.
only go 25 miles on a charge. It's like, where did you get that idea? One of my clients said because they don't have brakes.
Oh,
Yeah. That's not true, people. EVs have. All right. Were we talking about suggestion? Oh, Jesus
yeah.
also wants to say that EVs have brakes.
Yeah, sorry. I was gonna ask, I think it's our understanding that, you know, the LA Auto Show is also gonna be having a more fleet-focused component to it. So I wanted to ask Anne Marie and the team, what is the best way, you know, that you want us to send information about upcoming events to explore possible collaborations with, you know, those events or those organizations?
yeah, you can just send it to me and to Bruce, so we can take a look. Are you asking for us to be there? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think there would definitely be. I think it's going to be in November. You know, having some presence there, and kind of to Chris's point, right, is they have a ride and drive, right, so that people can see what can an EV actually do and get a firsthand experience testing it and driving it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I think Yusuf's going to talk about the toolkit. I don't think we got any comments back from the group.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I just wanted to, we talked about the Advanced Clean Fleets Outreach Toolkit in the previous meeting. Just wanted to quickly just share it with everyone, show you where it's at. Let me pull that up. Give me 1 second, please. All right, I think you guys can see that there. So yeah, I did make some updates per our last suggestion. I did move up for more information. Contact our Zev fleet here at ARB. I updated the link or put the link to our listserv to sign up and get updates. As well as put some talking points on for our drayage fleet component, high priority fleet components, state local government agencies, and then manufacturer sales requirements. The other comment was regarding the resource page. I did move it down further, and I combined the resources. So now the resources for advanced clean fleets are all here on one page. But if you scroll down, there are ACF reporting resources and zero emission vehicle resources here as well. And some of our carbs, other resources that we have and a potential tweet. So those are this outreach toolkit is almost being finalized. But if you have any comments or questions, relating to it, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll move forward and get that sent out here pretty soon, hopefully. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, just to let you know it's getting close to being done. And if you have any last minute comments, suggestions, don't hesitate to let me know.
Thanks, Yusuf.
Sorry, that looks really great, Yusuf. Any thoughts, ideas, comments, kudos?
Just thank you for the work on that.
No problem. And as soon as it's out, I'll go ahead and send it out to everyone in our outreach group here. All right, back to you, Chris.
All right. I think we are, for the first time, a little early on our agenda. And I believe that we had, I've lost the agenda. We had some opportunity for questions and comments from the panel. I did see Bradley sent me a IM that he's going to be at the NAFA show in a couple of weeks, and he's looking forward to having some portable messages. And I bet a lot of folks on this are going to be at ACT Expo and some other places coming up. So portable messages, it sounds like, is a important one. Bruce and I are going to be speaking at together on the same stage.
That's right. That's
Next
right. I
month.
saw your name on there. Just on that little message thing, I would love to get some, some ideas on some, some short speaking point topics. That's really the thing that I want to know. And again, I can give you all the fact sheets you want, and there's a lot of great information there. But I think when you're walking around a floor somewhere, and the first person that brought up those speaking points, that's more along the lines of, hey, did you know X or whatever? Please send me ideas. See what we can get rolling.
Okay, to-do item. And for those of you who are still playing the home game, and a lot of people are filling out this form, even if you filled it out, you can go back into it and add some more to give Bruce your ideas. But I think we also have a ability after the rest of the TRIG is asked any questions or made comments, that we can promote some of our folks to speaker and they can ask questions.
Yeah, I think, Mac, can you take raised hands?
It's added.
I didn't hear the answer to that. Is that a yes?
I added it, yeah.
Okay.
Do you have raised hands? No.
So for the folks that are our attendees, we have never had cushion in our meeting before. So this is an opportunity. If you'd like to ask a question, make a statement, please raise your hand and Mac will promote you so that you can speak out loud. And we'd love to hear from you. There's one. I see Mark. Make sure you turn yourself off mute, Mark.
Mark,
Yes. I believe
Go
you can
right
hear me
ahead.
then.
We can.
Great. Mark Bear with Altec Industries. So another equipment manufacturer, much like James. And yes, our customers are looking to us for guidance. I've cut and pasted to try and summarize and focus the pages of guidance on the ACT site. So I am eager to get CARB documents. That way I'm not looked at as responsible, dare I say it, that we're providing those documents. It sounds like they might not be available till May, but the process flow charts, I think, would be very helpful. We start with what kind of fleet they are and move quickly into the two paths of compliance, the default and the one that's by equipment type, and work our way through it. Today, I'm particularly interested if there are forms from CARB customers, fleets would use to apply for the exceptions and exemptions process.
Mark, I don't think there are forms just yet, but the team is working on it.
Thank you.
And Courtney.
Hi there. Good to see everybody. Courtney Copeland in the Office of Zero Emission Vehicle.
Oh, we lost Courtney. Mac?
Courtney's from GoBiz.
Okay, I was just prompted again to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I was saying Courtney Copeland, Office of Zero Emission Vehicle Market Development at GoBiz. I'm a program manager in our ZEV office focused on medium and heavy duty. So I'm trying to get find my feet in this new role focused on things like fleets. So I just wanted to kind of check in and say I'm really excited to be in this conversation to see about these resources that might be coming forward because GoBiz would like to help amplify, especially as talking points and media resources become available. Even though I'm not like a panelist in this group, so I wanted to know if we'll get this information sent to us if we're on these calendar invitations, because like within GoBiz on our websites and through our various channels, I'd like to help amplify some of this messaging. And then also just noting for follow-up, I'm having a conversation in the next few weeks with some people who have some OEM connections, some trucking association connections and such that I would love to help leverage.
Yeah, Courtney, we would probably share through the meeting that we have with you and CPUC and the CEC for, I think it's every other month or so that we get together, but we would definitely share with that core team.
Yes, it is every other month.
Oh, am I still able to talk? I am. Okay. I wasn't sure. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
And Courtney and I have been emailing the last couple of weeks about a different issue. And so it's nice to hear your voice, Courtney.
I know I run into you at lots of events. I feel like I see you everywhere and I'm like, there she is again. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments? Questions? We still have people filling out the form, the Google form. I keep seeing the number go up. So. All right, well, maybe we can let everybody go home 10 minutes early. Take a little spring break.
Yes, right.
So I might ask Cecile, any closing comments, any words of wisdom to go home by?
No, I think it's Emery who's doing the closing remarks. But for us who are in the local and state government, our deadline's April 1st for our inventory. So we're actually very busy finishing up our inventory and cleaning up everything. So that's our deadline, April 1st.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for all of the comments today. The team's going to regroup, look at how we can get this very portable, direct message for the different parts of ACF. Also, we are thinking about flowchart and how to help fleets understand, with the little information about them, what regulations apply to them. So it has been something, it's very difficult to do, but we have started to try to figure out what tools we have and kind of how that flow chart might work. So that's something we are working on actively. And then we want to make sure that we're working with all of you and the dealers and the networks that you have. So all of our messaging will be pushed out to everyone so that you can share that across and make this, bigger than we could ever do by ourselves. So I just want to say thank you, and you will be hearing from us soon on the messaging, and hope to just get your expertise too, and from what you're hearing and your experience in the field to help us just really nail that down. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.